Whoa. I found out I'm just a lick in your chain. You got me where you want me. I am nothing but your fool. Yeah, you treated me mean. Oh, I know y'all know this song. You treated me cruel. Come on, let's break it down. Oh, chain of fools. Talking about the chain. Yeah. It's got a wiggle link. Come on. I might be weak, yeah. Well, I'll give you the strength. Mm-hmm. But tell me to leave it alone. My papa said to come on home. Papa said, take it easy. Oh, your loving is a much too strong. Say, come on, y'all. Chain. Come on, wherever you're watching, just go ahead and sing. Chain of food. I know y'all got some. Chain of food. One of these mornings, we almost through. The chain's gonna break. Well, till then, yeah, I'm gonna take all I can take. Chain. Today we're talking about chains. We're talking about chains of fools and the way the fools use the tools that you've learned. Oh, yeah. Okay, y'all get the picture. Hello and welcome once again. I'm coming to you once more through the YouTubes on the computer. And I thank God. I thank Him for one more day. Just another chance to get it right. Another chance to make it tight. God has truly been good to me. And surely He is blessing us right here and right now. I'm excited to be before you today to talk about these here chains. Objection chains. I want to talk about how I mean by that and how I think it warrants a separate video. Because you understand, you all have learned these rules individually. See, understand that the rules you know now, these rules that you know now are known individually. Surely you understand. And by that I mean, if I were to count out or shout out 401, 404, 801, you'd be able to shout back what that rule is. And you'd be able to articulate and understand just what exactly is barred or allowed in by these rules. Okay? But now I want to talk to you about how these rules flow together. Because oftentimes during objections, it's not enough to just, for other teams to just give you one rule basis. Sometimes they'll give you multiple at one time. And you all have to become adroit in identifying when an objection has multiple bases and then therefore articulate why either the bases don't apply or they don't have the result upon application that the other side is trying to argue that it would have. Okay? So, I want to define what I mean by an objection chain. And as I write down objection chain, I just want to thank God for this new software that allows me to more effectively use two apps. Because I'm using the Microsoft Whiteboard app, give God praise for them, and the Google Chrome and the YouTube itself. And I thank God for all of that. It better help me teach and help me preach. It's a blessing to be before you again. Now let's talk about these objection chains. What do I mean by a chain? A chain is just a term I'm using. It's not canon or anything like that, so don't go spitting it out at other judges. Okay, it's just a heuristic device. I want you to understand how objections with multiple, say, bases connect and flow. Okay, rather simplistic definition of what I mean by an objection chain, but you'll see, and you'll work by way through example. Okay, so you have sometimes an objection, let's say 401 relevance. Sometimes that relevance can move and change to 404, or even, God forbid, the dreaded 403. Sometimes it'll move from there to a 608. So you'll have an objection that starts out as simple relevance, but then moves to a 404, that then can move to a 608 issue. How is that? Well, sometimes, the link here established is through logic. Sometimes it's just through, bad programs do this and do it quite frequently. Did I spell that right? I don't think I did. Let me look it up one more time. Diarrhea of the mouth. No, I didn't. Y'all pray for me. How am I supposed to teach y'all? Oh, I could do that? Oh, nice. I didn't know that. Okay. Oh, ain't God good. Did y'all know y'all can flip the Microsoft tablet pen over to erase like a pencil? That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Well, anyway, sometimes it comes through, my dear friend, diarrhea of the mouth. Okay? Bad teams usually use this. And you'll see some examples today through this video, which, by the way, I hope will be curt, because as much as it pains y'all to watch them in their entirety, assuming that y'all do that, it pains me even more to have to edit. Remember, I love you, but I don't love you that damn much. Now, the bad teams use diarrhea of the mouth. They'll just throw out any rule basis to try to exclude evidence or strike witness testimony. You understand? Excuse me. Sometimes they'll just throw out anything. And so in their haste to get the evidence excluded, they'll just cite random grounds. And you have to be able to deconstruct their argument one by one, whether it's through logic or whether they're just throwing out random crap. And you have to remember that at all times, you're the explainer in chief. Remember that? Remember we talked about that? Y'all should be nodding along. Yes, black man, we remember. Remember how Aquila walked us through what that means. And the Aquila shows us how it's done video. I'm going to link that in the description. That's what the YouTubers say. They say that all the time. I'm going to link you in the description. Shows us how it's done. Because remember, in that video, you had the opposing counsel talking about rules that don't exist, like 802 D2D, which doesn't exist. He brought up vicarious liability to talk about a hearsay issue. And Aquila had to take all of that, ingest it, and then spit it out in a more organized, coherent fashion, explaining how what opposing counsel was doing doesn't make sense. And see, this is where it pays off, where the Lexis of the world have sort of a leg up. If you have debating experience, you understand, you'd be quite adroit at this already. And so I guess this video is about showing you all how while the rules, you're kind of in the memorization phase of trying to understand how the rules just work individually. But by the end of this video, and with more practice, God willing, I pray, and it is my prayer, that you all will understand how the rules oftentimes flow together. Because they're not each on an island in and of themselves. They flow together like a puzzle. Okay? So that's my hope. These rules flow together. Okay? So I hope you better understand how they flow together after this video, how other teams will make them flow together, and how you have to go step by step and diffuse their argument and be able to advocate for whatever it is you're advocating, whether it's for a piece of evidence or whether it's for a line of testimony. Okay? So with all that being said, I have some videos up, and we're going to try to fly through them. I'm going to try to have this video over. It's not going to take no more than 40 minutes. If it take more than 40 minutes, well, y'all ain't going to get nothing. But I'm going to try to have it over in 40 minutes, okay? It's a cheerful day. I'm excited. It's Thanksgiving weekend. I hope your weekend was or your Thanksgiving week, your Thanksgiving meal was just as pleasant as mine was, because let me show y'all something. Mine was real pleasant. You want to know why? Because them Cowboys took a big old fat L. Look at them. Woo, they lost to the Bills, who apparently are really good. I did not know they were 9-3 until, hand to God, yesterday. I don't know how that team could be going under the radar like this. But anyway, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving. And to you Cowboy fans, well, I hope you didn't throw up too much. Okay. All right, so we're going to look at these two videos. Then I'm going to try to have you moving on. Amen? Look at your neighbor, say amen. I don't hear y'all talking. Amen. All right, let's watch.
That was before the whole shit.
Why would you say you're not a big fan of Miss Kosak?
Well, Kosak was being a real stickler for the rules about the food, about the chicken wings. They were bomb.com, like I said, a little tangy, a little sweet, blue cheese on top. But Kosak out here, sort of sport, wanted to move, wanted them out of there. Couldn't you just eat chicken wings?
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of personal knowledge and 403, if I might explain.
Okay.
Your Honor, this witness is testifying that Danny Kosak was a stickler for the rules, but this witness doesn't actually know what the rules were. For him to testify based on what he heard, that this meant she was being a stickler for the rules, she was following the rules and enforcing the rules, he doesn't have that knowledge, and for him to testify that she was, that's substantially more prejudicial than it is probative.
I may respond?
Respond to the foundation issue. I don't think it's more prejudicial. Sorry for that awkward pause. All right, I'm still working out the software. Y'all keep with me now. Now, so what happened? My boy, Kevin Spear, also known as Boyo, he was testifying as Hunter Cooper, who was kind of a weirdo in last year's case. Get some of the vets to tell you about the chimp. More about it if you want to. He testifies that that Danny Kosak, one of the parties in the case, was a stickler for the rules. Now, Dylan objects to 602, lack of personal knowledge, and, Sean Doe, that shouldn't have happened. It popped up. Okay, it'll go away. And 403. So this is a great first chain, I guess, for y'all to start thinking about. So during the colloquy, or, which is the technical term that we use for objection battle, Sam here, y'all know who Sam is going to have to be able to effectively address both arguments. Well, not really, because spoiler alert, I was presiding during this. This was one of our coaches' scrimmages last year between A-team coaches who included me, who else? Dylan, obviously, Tim and JC. Guest appearance by Sister Pat with a bat. So anyway, so Dylan starts off making a 602 argument. And his premise on the 602 argument is that because the witness didn't know the rule, that looks like BK as in Burger King, doesn't it? It does. Don't lie. Okay. Because witness didn't know the rule. Okay. Something happened. I see what happened. Give me 1 second. Yeah, doesn't it look crazy? That's my screen right now. Give me a second. Hopefully now, let's see. Yeah, I think it's working now. Okay. Sorry about that. The new technology. Y'all stay in prayer. Okay. Now, so anyway, back to the gridiron. Because Boyo, as the witness, didn't know the rules, he can't say whether someone was a stickler for them. And that makes sense, right? Amen. Y'all can say amen to that. That makes sense. So then he says to do that, to allow the witness to do that. Okay, here's how we get our chain. Okay? To do this being the aforementioned, testifying to whether or not someone is a stickler for the rules, would constitute a 403 issue. Does that make sense? So let's go over our chain here, so to speak. So Dylan here says, well, the witness can't testify as to whether or not someone was a stickler for the rules if the witness himself doesn't know what rules the person was being a stickler about. Okay? And that makes sense. And then to do that, to testify, to call someone a stickler for the rules based on rules that the witness doesn't even know about would be unduly prejudicial in that it would be one of the 4 dangers of 403. Again, I don't want to completely recap what we've already discussed, so I got to keep this video short. But to keep to it, one of the 4 dangers was misleading the jury. Oh, geez. Y'all gotta pray for my handwriting. It's getting worse. I think I'm arthritic. Okay? Y'all see that? Okay. So, now, I kind of dismissed it for Sam, but in real life, as you'll see in this video, and during rounds, the judges won't do that because, prior to this objection battle, the coaches got a little too objection trigger happy, and it made the coach's scrimmage even more painful than it had to be. So for purposes of time, I dismissed this outright. Why? Because even if it was improper to do the 602 or to have the witness testify about someone enforcing rules he didn't know about, the question is, does it meet the what kind of bar? This is like Dora the Explorer. Are you ready? What kind of bar does 403 have? High. The impropriety of the improper opinion is not high enough to meet the 403 bar. Or at least it wasn't in my opinion. And that's why I overruled that 404 objection outright. But technically, this is a good sort of primer into how these objection chains can work. Okay, because there was an improper opinion, the improper opinion had the tendency to mislead the jury. So therefore, it's both an improper opinion, and because it's an improper opinion, it's also more prejudicial than probative. Okay, that's the argument. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Okay, let me write that big, because some of y'all, love you, but some of y'all, man, I'm not gonna say it. Okay, this is the argument. Okay, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong. Right or wrong, I'm going to write a question mark. Okay? We don't know. So, you got to be able to defend. You understand? You got to be able to defend against this. So, let's see how Sam does. All right? We'll look at that for a little bit more. Oh, see, that's what I get. So, now I got to redo all this. Let's see. Let's see here. Give me a second. Oh, I didn't know if we were like, okay, it's back. It's fixed. Okay. So let's see how Sam responds. Y'all flow with me.
That she was. That's substantially more prejudicial than it is probative.
If I may respond?
Respond to the foundation issue. I don't think it's more prejudicial than probative, so I will overrule that particular objection. But let's talk about his ability to testify to following the rules.
Your Honor, that's a matter of weight versus admissibility. What he's testifying to is his perceptions of Miss Kosak when he saw her on set that day complaining about chicken wings.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
It's an absolute issue of admissibility. For this witness to testify that he knows something about how Miss Kosak approached the rules, how she enforced the rules, without actually having read the rules or knowing the rules himself. He doesn't have that knowledge, and for him to testify to that, that's a 602 issue.
Your Honor, if I may respond?
Last response.
He's not specifically talking about any particular rule, but rather his perception that, it seems like she was upset about a rule. And he is not being specific as to how Ms. Kosak followed rules in general. It goes strictly to a matter of weight and not admissibility.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one question.
Yes,
so,
sir.
in order for him to be able to testify about okay, so there we have our mention to the big old, our favorite fat man, weight versus admissibility. Okay, so Sam's argument, now remember, I had rejected outright the 403, so she only had to respond to the 602 objection. So how does she do that? She did that by making the tried and true weight versus admissibility argument. Okay? Now, I've tried to explain to a few of you, Lee, that's you, what what this weight versus admissibility thing means. And, to be honest, I've struggled to explain it. It's one of those things that you just get after sitting for trial after trial after trial. Okay? So, let's see here. I think that the best way to put it would be asking yourself this question. What's the bar? Just like with 403, what's the bar? It's a high bar. When we're talking about weight versus admissibility, it's really a question of what do the rules disallow, and for what reason do they disallow it? Okay, so in the context of 602, what's the title of 602? It's like Dora the Explorer. If you don't know it by now, there'll be another red hot YouTube video coming at you. So we'll see. Give me 1 second. I got another issue. Y'all pray for me. According to my homegirl Monica, I can get a vacation. She's the one who just called me, and the reason for the interruption. So she tried to hook me up with a free vacation. Needless to say, I'm not going for that. Okay, back to the gridiron. So the title for 602 is need for what, y'all? Personal knowledge. So, what was Dylan's argument again? How can somebody... Uh-oh, here we go. How can somebody testify to a rule or to someone enforcing a rule or being a stickler about a rule that that person doesn't know? Which is to say, how can person B call person or person A call person B a stickler about rules that person A doesn't even know about? Because then how do you know that they're a stickler for them if you can't even identify what the rule is? Okay? That's a 602 issue according to Dylan. Okay? So, Sam's response is whether or not it goes to weight. That there's not a requirement that the person needs to know about the rules. Only that the fact that he did not know goes to weight and not admissibility. Okay? So when we consider what the bar is someone needs to know something, according to 602, or know something about the thing they're testifying about. That was a very clunky sentence. If person A testifies to pie and how good my sweet potato pie was yesterday, I know y'all jealous, then person A needs to know about it. Okay? An argument goes to weight if it goes to how strongly the jury should consider it. Okay? That's a question or an argument to weight. So for Sam to say that Mr. Cooper, her witness, doesn't know the rules, but doesn't have to know the rules in order to say that the defendant, Danny Kosak, was a stickler about them. She's saying that that argument, that question, goes to how strongly or how much credibility the jury should assign to his opinion about Danny Kosak being a stickler for the rules. I hope that's clear. If not, rewind it back, or however that song goes. Okay, that's an argument for weight. An argument for admissibility is, Lord, I really gotta. This is ridiculous. This looks terrible. I'm sorry, y'all. Lord, whatever you're doing in this season. Okay, admissibility. That argument is, let's see. There is a requirement. The evidence is missing to be admitted, or, watch the or, a factor that keeps it out. Okay, I hope that much is clear. So weight is, when I make an argument to weight, I'm making an argument about how strongly or how much credibility the evidence or the testimony has. When an argument goes to admissibility, I'm making an argument that either the evidence is missing a requirement that has to be fulfilled in order for it to come in. That usually happens with, let's say, hearsay exceptions. All right, 803 except. Hopefully y'all, I know it's a lot, but y'all stay with me, okay? Or how about 608 or 609? Those sorts of things. There is a requirement missing in order for the evidence to come in. Or there's still a factor or something about this evidence that one of the rules of evidence excludes. Okay? So in other words, if there's evidence that we're claiming in inclusionary rule, y'all remember that? Then there's a requirement that needs to be added, maybe a foundation needs to be laid to get the evidence to qualify under that inclusionary rule, i.e. a hearsay exception, or there is something about the evidence that keeps it out. Maybe it's still hearsay, or let's say it's still improper character evidence, so on and so forth. Or in this case, bringing it back to our example, there's a 602 issue. So bringing it all the way back to the top, take it from me one time, listen to me. The evidence, or Boyo's opinion here about Kosak being a stickler for the rules while not knowing the rules, if that for that argument to go to weight, it would have to mean that there is no requirement that person A needs to know pi in order to testify about it. But because it is the case that person A has to know pi in order to testify about it, Dylan's argument doesn't go to weight. Why? Because it's missing a requirement. Y'all see that? I hope that's clear. It's missing a requirement, or it has yet to fill a requirement or fulfill a requirement that allows the rule to be admitted, or allows the evidence to be admitted into evidence. Okay? So when we think about weight versus admissibility, it boils down to these two things. Whether, first of all, arguments go to weight versus admissibility. Okay? I'm going to write that here. No, I could do better than that. arguments go to weight or admissibility. Okay? Y'all see that? Arguments go to weight or admissibility. What goes to weight? I'm going to say it again. It's not broken, I promise. Arguments go to weight or admissibility. Okay? So it's usually a response. Lord have mercy. A response to an objection. Okay? To say that something goes to weight or admissibility. Okay? And if it goes to weight, it's an argument that just simply goes to show how strongly, or I guess how little, the jury should consider the evidence. If it's an argument about admissibility, you're saying one of these two things, that either the evidence is yet to fulfill a requirement, sufficient evidence or sufficient foundation has yet to be laid to establish the evidence is coming in under an exception or under an inclusionary rule more generally, or there's something about the evidence, okay, that still makes it inadmissible. Maybe it still goes to improper character evidence, or it still goes to an unfair prejudice, so on and so forth. Are we clear? That's weight versus admissibility. I spent a lot of time on that because it is something that's kind of hard to grasp at first. And you only really get it, I think it clicked for me around my sophomore year, honestly, after hearing that a bunch and piecing it together, just almost like magic. God is a good God. Sometimes it happened like that. And it'll happen like that for y'all. But hopefully that's clear. Arguments go to weight or admissibility. And if the argument is concerning simply how strongly the jury should consider the evidence, then their argument goes to weight. And therefore, it doesn't keep the evidence out. Let me write that down. So that's what you mean when you say that. Arguments that go to weight don't exclude evidence. Okay? Makes sense? All right? Whereas an argument that goes directly to admissibility, if it's true that it doesn't meet a requirement, that needs to be met in order for the evidence to come in through an inclusionary rule, or if it's true that there's still a factor about the evidence that makes an exclusionary rule keep it out, then that goes directly to admissibility, and as such, it can still be excluded by that argument. Wait a minute, rewind it back if you got a question. All right? So notice Dylan's response. I know I spent a long time on this, but notice Dylan's response when Sam makes her weight not admissibility argument. Listen to it. Following the rules, wouldn't he have to know the rules? So he could be able to testify what she was following or her being a stickler for these rules. Wouldn't he have to know them?
Your Honor, he does not have to testify to knowing specific rules, as he's just going to, once again, what he's perceiving. Now, he doesn't need to know exactly what was going on with guidelines that Ms. Kosak sent to MTS. He's just going about what he saw and said that day. And him saying, oh, it appeared like she was being a stickler for rules, is his characterization of what he thought was going on. Not necessarily that he had knowledge of rules.
But he's characterizing her as being a stickler for the rules without knowing what the rules were. So would he have to know those rules in order to know whether or not she was trying to strictly enforce them?
No, Your Honor, because the content of whether Ms. Kosak or not was being a stickler for the rules is not an issue here. What he's characterizing here is his perception.
Testify to that? Did he say?
Yes, Your Honor, that was a statement he made. But however, in the context, it's not being used for whether Ms. Kosak actually followed rules or not. It's just going to how he saw Ms. Kosak interact with, if I may proffer,
Okay.
MTS employees that day and how food was out and set.
Okay, this is what I'll do. I'm going to strike the specific line about Kosak being, quote, a real stickler for the rules, because I do think, I agree with plaintiff counsel that he does have to know what the rules are in order for him to testify about whether or not she was a stickler about them or trying to get people to follow them. But the part about, what he witnessed the witness doing or the defendant to do in terms of getting food moved and telling people what to do, I'll allow that testimony in because that's within his ability to observe and to relay. So I'll sustain the objection part, we'll strike the characterization of Ms. Kosak as a real strict stick. But the rest of it about the food and instructions and moving stuff will admit. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, you saw Ms. Kosak complain about
All right. So y'all can see what happened. I guess it wasn't really Dylan responding, but it was me. But anyway, the point was I kept that evidence out because Dylan's argument that you have to know about the rules in order to say someone was a stickler about them was an argument that goes directly to admissibility. Why does it go to admissibility? Because there was a requirement that the opinion was missing, so to speak, that the line of testimony was missing, that the line of testimony had not fulfilled. That was necessary in order for the opinion to come in. Okay? And so that argument didn't go to weight, it went directly to admissibility. But hopefully that is a good example of what that phrase means. And that's not to say that arguments never go to weight. Sometimes they do. You just have to be able to point out and understand when they go to weight so that you can effectively articulate that during your advocacy. Okay? And that's all through one chain. Chain, chain, chain. I don't hear y'all singing it. Chain of fool. Okay? Now, I know I told you a story, and I did. I told you a pretty big story. I said I was going to have the video done in 40 minutes. That was a story. That was wrong. Okay? I want to show you another one. It took me a little longer than I thought to play the video. Okay? I'm going to show you another one. If I can scroll the thing down. Okay. I'm going to show you another one. Okay? Show you another one. Then I'm going to try to roll us out of here. Okay? Lift your hands to receive it. Now, give me 1 second. This is... No. Oh, yeah, why not? Let's do that. Okay? This is my boy, my favorite Cubano, Nick Ramos from New York University. He did my trial for 4 years. Dylan and I met him at Trial by Combat. He's a good guy. This is footage from one of their scrimmages they had against Yale. So these are two good programs talking about or practicing a case from 2015, I think it was. And let's go through the chain. Let's see how they argue through the objections here. So they know the rules individually, but again, this is about talking about how they work together and flow together. How sometimes you'll have a rule basis change from 401 to something else. Okay? So let's take a moment. Let's think about how this particular objection, how that goes. If I can.
Right, in 2013 I was moved over into that division. You getting moved over into that special investigations division, doing more of the work you wanted to be doing all along, it coincided with the police getting a new chief. Isn't that true?
That's right, Frank Kimball.
Now, right as you started in the special investigations unit, Frank Kimball actually sent you an email. Isn't that true?
He sent the entire department an email. It was his priorities, now that he just got in his office.
Let's talk about a couple of the priorities that he sent to you. Would you recognize a copy of that email if I showed it to you?
I'm sure I would, yeah.
Let the record reflect I'm showing a copy of Defense Exhibit A to counsel. Permission to approach the witness. Yes.
Thank you.
This looks like a copy of the email that you received just as you got moved to this job that you wanted to do all along, right?
Yeah, this is the email.
It looks fair and accurate.
It does.
We move this into evidence as Defense Exhibit A.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay more prejudicial than probative.
All right, response. Your Honor, this isn't hearsay because it's going to the effect that it had on Officer Keenan. Officer Keenan was given instructions by his police chief to be newsworthy, to use innovative and relentless methods to catch corruption that they knew was there. And that affects his subsequent investigation and the credibility of both the evidence he recovered and his testimony.
Your Honor, may I be heard? The document in its entirety contains statements that are not in fact being offered for the effect on the listener. Statements like, if it isn't newsworthy, it isn't worth your time.
Sidebar for this.
Oh.
Right.
Yes.
I apologize, we should have asked for a
Yeah,
second.
constructive sidebar, Your Honor. Statements like Midland's
So let's talk about what's going on in this. So we have an email here, and I can pull up the email for a second. This is the email. Oh, Lord. I hate when it does that. Here's the email here. Y'all see it to the side. It's right here. Okay. Nope. You're not going to let me do it? Okay. Okay, I guess not. Okay, usually I can mark on it, but I guess not today. Okay. So, okay, it's still not going to let me mark on it. I guess I should get over it, huh? Okay, there we go. So, here's an email that one side is trying to use to discredit the witness, who is a detective in this case. Okay, so the detective was a traffic cop for a long time, hence the cross pocket about it right before they went through the process of trying to enter some evidence in. The evidence being this email. And the point of that cross pocket was to basically cast the detective as someone eager to move up within the ranks, someone who was dissatisfied, you understand, dissatisfied with how he was being used within the force, and someone who wanted to move up at any means necessary. And the contention here with this email was that, that was basically the action guidance of the police chief at the time, who was Frank Kimball. I don't know why. This is starting to make me mad. Y'all still with me? Don't lose me now. Okay? He was the police chief at the time. Okay? With things like be newsworthy, let's see, and all that kind of stuff. You see these things I'm highlighting here. We got to push the envelope. We got to do whatever it takes to crack down on criminals. Let's see. If it's not newsworthy, it's not worth your time. Crack down on corruption, those sorts of things. So the guy in the video by the name, his name is Daniel Stern. His priority with this email is to show that basically the overzealousness of the police officer's investigation, the undercover cop, somehow influenced the evidence and the findings, and was therefore somehow a link in a chain of probable cause that exonerates his client. Okay, and so the action guidance of the police chief, he argues, is what influences that rush during the investigation. That's all the argument it is cumulatively. Okay, so the other girl from NYU objects that this argument is, well, that the evidence is both hearsay and 403. Now, it's unclear how these two things, Lord, how these two things work together. But again, this is another example. Sometimes you get more than one objection at a time. And this is more akin to the latter approach, I should say, to invoking multiple rules, because these two rules aren't really connected, or at least not in this particular case. But she invokes both of them anyway, without much explanation. So Daniel Stern has to do it. So he has to say first why it's not hearsay. He says it's not hearsay because it goes to the effect on the listener. Y'all see that? And then it's not more prejudicial than probative because the probative value of the evidence is essentially how the investigation was rushed. Okay? So, let's keep going through the video and see how this progresses. So first, Daniel, he has to explain why it's not hearsay, why it's not more prejudicial than probative. The other girl gets a chance to respond. Let's take a listen at that.
This is corrupt. Everyone knows it. Statements like, it isn't newsworthy, it isn't worth your time. Those aren't being offered for the effect on the listener. They're being offered for their truth. And for that reason, it's more prejudicial than probative. As they said on their opening statement, they're going to be calling into question the credibility of the Midland State Police Department.
Your Honor, certainly
I already cut you off pretty fast. I apologize.
Well, we believe that it is more prejudicial than probative, that is being offered for its truth. It doesn't meet any hearsay exceptions.
I'll start with the hearsay argument that counsel raised.
Okay.
Certainly we don't believe it's actually true that there was corruption in Miss Covington's gambling commission, so we're not offering that statement for the truth of the matter asserted. We're offering that statement because this young cop, eager to move up from his beat and from his traffic responsibilities, was told by his police chief that there was corruption in the gambling commission and they needed to find it, even though they didn't have evidence of it yet. He was told to do whatever it takes to be newsworthy and to make an arrest using innovative and relentless methods. That affected his investigation, and it is not hearsay, it's relevant evidence.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
There are statements that are still being offered for their truth. Our investigative team needs to focus on petty crime and dedicate themselves to building solid and strong cases against the most powerful citizens. That's not in order. It's being offered for its truth. Furthermore, Your Honor, this email contains a response from Mickey Keenan, which is being offered purely for its truth. It doesn't mean any hearsay exceptions at this point. And we ask that it's not entered, Your Honor.
All right, final response as to the words, so limit your response to the words of this witness in response to the chief's words. What's the relevant words to that and why is that not?
Of the reply.
Correct.
Sure, it shows exactly what we're using the chief's email to prove. I mean, we're demonstrating through this interaction that Chief Kimball presents this set of highly troubling instructions to the cop, and then the cop's response that he agrees with all of the instructions and that he wants to be legendary for the chief. It goes to show the bias of his investigation.
All right. Have you heard the arguments? I think this is a close call because I think this is only marginally relevant. So I'm going to admit D1, but I'm going to instruct counsel to make sure that we're moving rapidly through this line of questioning because I think it's only tentatively relevant to what we're doing here.
Your Honor, may I ask for a limiting instruction to show that these are only going to be effect on the listener and not for the truth?
Yes, I'll give that instruction to the jury shortly.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so what was the end result? So you all heard. They kept going back and forth. First, they went through the hearsay rather quickly. They talked about Mr. Stern's contention was that the statements went to the effect on the listener. And notice what her response was to that argument, that it was going to the truth of the matter asserted. Okay? And then Stern took the literalist approach, which is, kind of what I would take and what I recommend you all take. The truth of the matter asserted in the statements, if it isn't, newsworthy, you all can read. You see it right here. Newsworthy, blah, blah, blah. They're not offering to show that indeed, if it's not newsworthy, it's not worth the police's time. With crackdown on corruption, they're not interested in trying to prove that Midlands is corrupt. So here you have two good attorneys juggling two arguments at the same time, talking about how this email is both hearsay, or in Daniel's case, arguing why it's not hearsay, while also talking about the probative value to show that the investigation was rushed and that that the officer doing the investigation was overzealous. Okay, so notice how he's able to juggle both of these. In this case, you really don't have, let's say, an argument based on, or there's no chain there. You don't have an argument that flows from one objection to another in a nice chain. It's just anything that they can use to throw the to throw the evidence out, both hearsay and 403. Even though she really didn't articulate an unfair prejudice, there was none. I would say it might not have been relevant, but there was certainly no unfair prejudice articulated. And because of that, and because of the fact that, as Daniel said, notice how he's able to deal with the truth of the matter asserted. You'll have teams who'll continuously do that, who will insist that when you're entering a document, you're automatically using it for the truth. Remember, truth of the matter is different. Is different than content. Okay? Yeah, I was using it for the content to show the content's effect on the listener, but not to prove that the content and the statements therein are true. As he said, I like the way he put it, and this is how when you get really good at this stuff, you can kind of go at it with your own unique style and with a little twist to it, put something on it. He said, as a representative of the Midlands state government and the Gambling Commission, surely we're not trying to argue that Midlands is corrupt. We're not arguing that that there is corruption in the Midlands Gambling Commission. Right, exactly. So obviously they're not going to be using these statements here to prove the truth value of the statements, but instead they're using it for that other use, which would be permitted, or at the very least not excluded by the hearsay rule. Okay? So that was an instance of two objections that didn't really connect. There was no case where the fact that it was hearsay made it more prejudicial than probative, or certainly not vice versa. But it's an example of how you have to juggle both arguments. You take your time, take those one piece at a time. Okay? Now, notice how he did that. He asked the judge if I could take it one piece at a time. That's what we have to do. Okay, because we'll have plenty of teams try it. Okay, try, just throw anything up against the wall to see what sticks. Okay? But we have to be able to slow it down, take it one objection at a time. I will say it again. We have to be able to slow it down and take it one objection at a time and explain. Okay? So, one more, and then I'm going to let you go with the benediction. I know y'all getting tired of it, but we almost through. Okay? Now, here is the Cubano. Okay? Now, the other video was made by the Cubano. This one, it features the Cubano. This is at the trial by combat competition. He made the finals and won. So this is him crossing. Surprise, another police. Well, this guy's a forensic investigator. So he's not quite a police officer. He's not quite a pathologist. But his line of questioning here pertains to, in the case, there was some new science that was discovered that helped the police collect evidence that they weren't able to obtain previously, because the murder took place in like 98 and they were able to arrest the criminal only like in 2017, charge him, and obviously this is the trial, quote unquote, to try to convict, because there was a discovery of new evidence courtesy of this new science. And so Ramos, being on, I think is he on the defense? No, he's on the prosecution. That's right. He's crossing on this new science, I think. I'm confused. I forgot what side he was on. But anyway, he's crossing on the validity of the science. Okay, we're almost through. Look at your neighbor, say, neighbor, we almost through. Okay, let's take a listen at this.
And it's been used in court since 2013, right?
That's correct.
Specifically European courts, right?
I believe most of the instances in which it's been used have been overseas. That's correct.
Now, you would agree that you yourself know of 10 prosecutions that make use of the technique.
Absolutely. That's correct.
And in every single one of those prosecutions, it's never been overturned, right?
Objection, Your Honor, improper opinion may be heard.
Yes.
To ask this witness to testify about what's happened in other cases, whether convictions have been overturned, it's asking him to talk about legal issues. He was called here today to talk about the technical aspects of the fingerprint analysis that he conducted. For him to talk about any legal issues invades, well, frankly, your job as judge, Your Honor, in the province of the jury.
Response, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
So we're not actually asking him to talk about legal issues. What we're doing
Okay, so first you have an improper opinion objection. Now, this guy is an expert, so obviously they had to lay 702 foundation. You ought to know that one by now. But notice the flow. Again, this is about how the rules interact with one another, how teams will oftentimes use multiple rules. You got to be able to tell which is which and work your way through the objections. Okay? So now, you had the 702. This guy, his specialized knowledge, so the A prong of 702 here, his specialized knowledge, I hope y'all can read this. I'm starting to notice how faint these letters look. I hope y'all can see them. If you were blind like me, you wouldn't be able to see it. But let me see. I'm trying to help you. Okay, specialized. Okay, that's marginally better. His specialized knowledge is in forensics. Almost waxed into one of my characters. Forensic science. Yeah, y'all gotta pray for my spelling. It's getting worse. Forensic. Okay? Whereas Ramos here is asking about whether or not he knows about the convictions using the evidence, using the forensics, and whether or not those convictions were affirmed or vacated and remanded by higher courts. That calls for, her argument is, I think that's Rachel Summers, her argument is that calls for an opinion outside the scope. Okay? Outside the scope of forensics. And then notice these other two things that she said. Because then we get our old friend again, the one that makes me want to throw up. You understand? We get 403. She says, because these call for a legal opinion, I'll just say that being a legal opinion, she says that this invades the province of the jury. That is a 403 turn of phrase. That is one of the 403 dangers, okay, that 403 keeps out. And this is where you got to know your rules, right? Because she just throws that phrase out. You got to be able to understand what that means and where she's coming from. Because she didn't say the number. She just simply said this is an improper opinion because it calls for a legal analysis. And because it calls for a legal analysis, it's also invasive to the province of the jury. Without saying it violates Rule 403 or 403 excludes it. You see? And so if you don't know the rule, you're not going to be able to identify that she shifted, that she has put a new link, glory to God, on this chain. So do y'all see why I've called this video Objection Chains? Because see how it flows through, okay? That's her argument. That doesn't mean it, remember, just like with Dylan's chain, with the 602 to 403, that doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, okay? That's just the argument. You got to be able to understand the argument to combat it. So you got to be paying attention, okay? So notice, so now let's listen to Ramos's response.
Doing is we're talking about the reliability of this technique. So they're trying to cast doubt that this technique can actually produce things, whether it's a new technique, things like that. I believe those were issues that were brought up in the direct. If this technique has been accepted by the forensic community, has been well established, regardless of the fact that it's been around since 2013, it's important for the members of the jury to understand that this technique has been shown to be reliable.
Your Honor, may be heard.
Yeah, yes, and then I have a question for each of you. Go ahead.
There's certainly other ways to establish whether or not this method is reliable. Its error rate, for example, just experts comparing work or peer-reviewed work, things like that. But to go the extra step and say that the method is reliable because it's resulted in convictions that haven't been overturned, that is not the proper foundation to lay because it goes into these legal issues.
Understood. My question for the
Okay, so do y'all see what happened there? Ramos's response was they went into it on direct. In other words, his response was they opened the door. And because they opened that door, they're tacitly, his argument goes, they're tacitly acknowledging that he's qualified to talk about whether or not the forensic evidence or this new forensic method that was used in other trials is something that he can't testify to. Because if they did it, then they open the door to allow him to do it and ask questions about it. And they concede that he's qualified indeed to talk about it. Now, this method happens to have the added advantage of killing two birds with one stone. Because he's talking about the convictions here on cross, he's trying to use that. Oh, look at God! I didn't know I could do that. He's using that here to explain its probative value. That it's not probative, or it's not more prejudicial to probative, because the probative value is if the let's say forensic method has sustained other convictions, then it must be valid. His argument now is a conditional. So he's using the testimony about the other evidence, or the forensic method, being used to support a conviction, to show that if it supported a conviction in the past, that it must be a valid way to do forensics. You with me? Knock on wood if you're with me. I can hear you knocking. Yeah, that means you too, Lexi. Knock on wood. Okay, so that method is valid because it sustained other convictions in the past, and he can talk about it. So that's the probative value, and because they talked about this on direct, he can talk about the other convictions. Do you see that? I hope so. So notice how this objection is flowing right now. So you have a 702 issue and you have a 403 issue. Whether or not he's qualified to talk about other legal convictions and a legal conclusion, essentially, and then whether or not that has probative value. Okay? So let's see. Now let's hear what the judge has to say about it.
The defense is, you're saying that whether or not this has led to any convictions being overturned is irrelevant and potentially misleading.
Yes.
If there was evidence that this, in its brief tenure as science, had led to convictions being overturned, wouldn't you, as the defense attorney, be jumping up and down and telling me how relevant that is?
Your Honor, the issue is, regardless of whether or not it's relevant, it's substantially more prejudicial than it is probative.
Okay. Mr. Ramos, you're telling us that the fact that it hasn't led to any convictions being overturned is evidence that it's reliable, but this has only been in use since 2013. Most of the time when there's a wrongful conviction, it takes more than 5 years to determine that. So isn't this the kind of thing that's going to mislead a jury unfamiliar with the speed of the judicial system?
No, Your Honor. The technique has been around since 2008. It's only been in use since 2013. But we believe that a technique that's been around for, let's say, 10 years, there would have been some sign or some sorts of studies, and that's what we're about to delve into, other signs that it might be wrong, that it's something that can lead to wrongful convictions.
Okay. I'm going to permit the government to talk about peer review, studies, etc. But as for its use in the court system, I agree with the defense that given the brief time in which it's been available, evidence about convictions being overturned in other jurisdictions with different rules is problematically misleading, or at least potentially misleading. So I'm going to sustain the objection, and the jury will disregard testimony about how this process has been used in other court systems.
May I proceed?
You may.
So, sir, this is a peer-reviewed technique, right? Yourself have read about.
So there you have it. So the judge overruled or sustained one part of the objection, the 403 issue. Okay? Not on invading the province of the jury, but on the fact that it was misleading. So you got to be able to pay attention. Well, I'll write it down here. 403 sustained, Jesus of Nazareth, keep me near the cross. 403 sustained because it's misleading. So you got to be able to see where the objections and stuff are headed and how they're flowing. See, we start off with an improper opinion. This guy has no ability to testify about a legal conclusion, a legal concurrence, why the convictions essentially, or a legal occurrence, and why the convictions were sustained considering the forensic evidence. Okay? Then it moves to because, and to do that would invade the province of the jury. Okay? Ramos responds by saying, well, no, they went into this on direct. Therefore, he can testify about these convictions. And then he says the probative value of doing so outweighs the prejudicial value because it goes to the validity of the new method. If this new method has sustained other convictions in other courts, then it makes it more likely that it is valid. And the validity of the method, the main method being used to excavate this new evidence, forensic evidence, is of course highly probative. Okay? So then, then she kind of slyly changed the objection to a 403, just, more prejudicial than probative. She didn't say misleading. She just said more prejudicial. Okay? And then the judge kind of stepped in and he made it clear where his leanings were. And see, notice how the judge perfectly summed up the event. That doesn't always happen. It sounds like Justin Bernstein, presiding. I'm not exactly sure if it is him. I forgot. But Justin Bernstein, if you don't know, was I think he was president of AMTA. I think he was somebody's coach, maybe UCLA's coach or Berkeley's coach, one of those coaches. Then he moved to Drexel University to help their trial advocacy program, which is why you see here Drexel University School of Law. And then I think now he's doing something again. But anyway, he's a really competent judge. And so he was able to follow this perfectly. And this was a complicated one, how it moved through. Okay? You all have to be able to, at your point of response, understand how the objection has flowed up to that point and where you want to take it. Okay? So where you want to take it, you want to be able to advocate for whatever thing you're trying to, advocate for whatever evidence you're trying to either exclude or admit. So, as Ramos, you see his tactic here was to establish that he could testify about this and it had probative value. Her tactic was she shifted from the 702 and just focused on the 403. So maybe that's something you can do if you feel like one of the grounds of your objections is wrong. But the point is, you got to pay attention and listen. Okay? Listen. That's so important. Because if you don't listen, you'll get caught behind and you'll allow the diarrhea of the mouth. Let's go all the way back to the beginning here. You'll allow, let's say, people like who Aquila was facing to just say stuff, whether it be true or not, to make them sound good and smart. Okay? But in reality, it's ridiculous. You got to be able to point out when they're incorrectly quoting stuff. You see that here. You got to be able to follow the argument to know where they're changing and what to address. A lot of times you don't know what to address, or sometimes you might not know what to address if you're not listening. So, like, notice here with the Dillon stuff. Dillon was 602 and moved to 403. I kind of helped out by overruling the 403 off the bat. But you got to know what to respond to and how to respond. Okay? Sam had the 403 or had the 602 argument that it went to weight, and Dillon said explicitly, this does not go to weight. it goes to admissibility. That's a good example of how to respond to what's being said. See how the chain flows together. Here's an example here of a more, okay, y'all flow with me, almost done. Just summarizing. Here's an example of what happens when you just get a bunch of random objections, hearsay and 403. And you got to be able to listen and go exactly or make the claim and respond to what's being said. First, taking it one piece at a time. First to the hearsay, because it's going for the effect on the listener, it's not hearsay. And the probative value is to show that the investigation was being rushed. This is a skill, again, that you can see, that you can see in the Aquila video that, again, is being linked to in the description. You all need to watch that video as much as possible and look for the nuance. Look for how he sets the tone, how he flows through his objection chain, and how he responds to what's being argued, and how he listens to be able to address and correct misinformation and advocate. So all of these are examples of how messy and complicated objection arguments are or tend to be. And I hope that it's a good example to you. I know this was a long video of how you can move through it. Okay? All right? Now, none of these arguments were right or wrong, so to speak. I'm not saying, oh, this was bad or this is whatever. Sometimes you do have to. Sometimes it's terrible form to object to more than one rule. Sometimes it's a good strategy and a fine strategy. But it's all about presentation and being able to respond and being able to present well. Make your arguments logical, make them responsive, make them precise, and address what's being said. And all of the speakers presented herein, whether it was the Ramos video, whether it was Daniel Stern and some other girl from NYU whose name eludes me, or whether it was Sam and Dylan, they all did a good job, by and large, of addressing one another. Sometimes some arguments were better than others, but they were all listening and responding to what was being said, and they were loosely aware of how the chain of argumentation, how the objection chain was flowing together. Okay, kids? So this one was a short. This video is longer, but it's a lot less intensive for me in terms of Jesus of Nazareth, in terms of preparation, because this was just kind of like almost a walkthrough of how to do film study more than anything else. But I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you had a very good Thanksgiving. Remember, I love you, and I'm always here for you. And until the next video, may the love of God, the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the sweet communion of the Holy Spirit rest, rule, and abide henceforth and forevermore. You may go in peace. Bye.